Lucas disappeared, he was just 8 years old. His parents, Sarah and John, had never stopped searching for him. It wasn't a typical disappearance. He hadn't wandered off or gotten lost in the woods. One night, after dinner, he had simply vanished. No sign of struggle, no clues, nothing to explain his absence. It was as if the earth itself had swallowed him whole. Years passed. Sarah and John never gave up hope, even as the search grew colder and colder. Flyers with Lucas's face were posted everywhere. The media picked up the story for a while, but eventually even the police stopped looking. The case went cold. They tried to move on, but every year Sarah would light a candle for him on his birthday, and John would look out at the woods behind their house, wondering if one day their son would come home. And then one day he did. Lucas walked up the front steps of the house at 25 years old, looking just like the boy who had disappeared all those years ago. He was dressed in plain clothes, his dark hair long and unkempt, his face gaunt. When Sarah opened the door and saw him standing there, her breath caught in her throat. "Mom, Dad, it's me. It's Lucas," he said, his voice deep and unfamiliar, but the same all the same. For a moment, Sarah stood frozen, unable to speak. Her heart raced, disbelief creeping in. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times, but it had never been like this. Her son was home. He was alive. She reached out for him, pulling him into a tight embrace. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Where have you been? We've searched for you for so long. I know, Mom. I know," Lucas interrupted, his tone strange, almost hollow. "I'm sorry. Don't remember much of what happened, but I'm here now." The reunion was nothing like Sarah had imagined. It should have been filled with joy, with tears of happiness. But there was something off about Lucas's demeanor. He didn't seem to fit the memory of the boy she had lost. His smile was forced, his eyes distant. John, who had been sitting in the living room, stood up in shock when he saw his son. "Lucas, you're really back." His voice cracked with emotion as he approached. Lucas turned to him, but the hug was colder than Sarah's had been. It was as if Lucas didn't quite know how to embrace his father. He pulled back too quickly, as though the closeness made him uncomfortable. "I guess I don't remember much," Lucas repeated, his voice trailing off. "But I'm home." That night, Sarah made Lucas his favorite meal, lasagna, just like the old days. It felt like a piece of normalcy, except it didn't. Lucas sat at the table, picking at the food absent-mindedly, never quite engaging with his parents the way he once had. His eyes seemed to be constantly scanning the room as if he were looking for something, or maybe someone. The next morning, things started to take a darker turn. Sarah woke up to find the kitchen in disarray. Dishes had been thrown, chairs knocked over, and the fridge door left wide open. The smell of burnt toast lingered in the air, but Lucas was sitting at the kitchen table, calmly reading a book, as though nothing was wrong. "Lucas, what happened here?" Sarah asked, her voice shaking. Lucas didn't even look up. "I was hungry. I'm not used to cooking things for myself." Sarah felt a pang in her chest. Something wasn't right. She thought back to when Lucas was a child. He was always so careful, so neat. This wasn't like him at all. As the days passed, the strange behavior continued. Lucas started doing little things that made Sarah uncomfortable, things that didn't quite align with her memory of her son. One day, she found him standing in the hallway, staring at the family pictures on the wall. He was tracing the edges of the photos with his fingers, his face expressionless. When Sarah asked him what he was doing, he simply said, "These are just pictures, right? It's strange to look at them, like I don't belong in them." "What do you mean, Lucas?" she asked, confused. "Oh no," he said, his eyes flickering with something dark. "It's like I'm just a stranger in these moments, a stranger in my own life." Later that week, Sarah noticed something even stranger. Lucas had begun spending long hours in the basement, the old, abandoned part of the house where they used to store old furniture and belongings. She asked him what he was doing down there, and he'd give her vague answers, "Just thinking," or "I need some space." But when she would walk past the basement door, she could hear strange noises, scraping, clicking sounds like metal scraping against stone. One evening, she could take it no longer. Sarah went down to the basement, determined to find out what was going on. As she descended the stairs, she saw him. Lucas was kneeling in front of the wall, his hands digging into the dirt behind an old shelf. He turned slowly, his eyes wide and unblinking, as though he hadn't noticed her approaching. "Lucas," she whispered. He smiled. It wasn't a warm smile, but a twisted, unsettling grin. "You shouldn't have come down here, Mom." Suddenly, Sarah froze. From behind him, half buried in the dirt, she saw something that made her blood run cold. It was an old, frayed teddy bear, a bear she recognized, Lucas's favorite bear from when he was little. But this bear wasn't just worn, it was stained, burned, and torn apart. "Where did you find that?" Sarah demanded, her voice trembling. Lucas stood up and walked toward her, his steps slow and deliberate. He didn't answer. Instead, he reached out and placed the bear in her hands. As she held it, she felt a chill in her bones. And then the twisted truth hit her. This was not the son she had lost. The real Lucas or Lucas was gone. This was someone else. Someone or something that had come back in his place. This thing that wore her son's face had no memories, no warmth, and no love. It was an imposter, a hollow shell with only a faint echo of the boy she once knew. Suddenly, Lucas's eyes darkened and he whispered, "You'll never get rid of me." And in that moment, Sarah realized that Lucas's return had never been about finding closure or love. He wasn't seeking